Thank you for joining us on this 10 Investigates special licensing loophole. A certified nursing assistant here in the Bay Area was arrested, accused of inappropriately touching a woman in his care. What investigative reporter Jennifer Titus found was called shocking by lawmakers. Because of a glitch, this CNA was able to get job after job after job while under investigation. 10 Investigates reporting led to a new law in Florida to protect some of the most vulnerable in our community. But it started with finding the loophole.
At the end of the day, I'm a healthcare worker. At the end of the day, I'm licensed. At the end of the day, that shouldn't have occurred, and I'm owning up to that.
She's got a huge heart. She's really sweet. She's a great person.
At 50 years old, Ashley's mom, Deborah, had a stroke. Since then,
she needs 100% help all the time.
Living in a nursing home.
We check in with each other several times throughout the day.
Needing around-the-clock care.
She casually mentioned to me that someone touched her in a wrong way.
That was in 2016. Ashley says that someone was CNA Phalo Kane.
That's wrong on my part.
I said, wait a minute, what do you mean by someone touched you? She went into further detail telling me, that he had touched her in her private areas.
Florida law requires licensed healthcare practitioners to report sexual abuse allegations to the Department of Health. That means Deborah's incident would have been reported to the state. But when we head to the Department of Health's website, look up Kane's license, it showed no complaints and no discipline. An email from the Department of Health spokesperson says that same statute where you're required to report an allegation also states that if a complaint does not rise to a level of probable cause being found, that complaint never becomes public record.
It's heartbreaking to see her go through something like that because she is aware of what's going on. She does understand that what was happening to her was wrong.
But what happened to Deborah continued to happen to other patients, according to police. He was accused of touching patients inappropriately at 6 other facilities. He was even arrested for one of those incidents in 2018, but continued to work. Were you guys surprised to see when you started the investigation in 2019, when those allegations came to the forefront, that he was able from 2016 to 2019 hop around to so many places?
I can't say that I'm surprised. It just depends on how he ended up working through that system. And that's not something I was familiar with.
Let's talk about that system. If Florida law was enforced, Kane should have been disciplined or penalized because he entered a no-contest plea for an incident that relates to caring for patients. With his plea, he served 30 days in jail and was placed on probation, but the board never requested disciplinary action until September 2019. That same month, he was arrested for more incidents. That's when it finally requested his license be revoked. Remember, he worked 3 more jobs after that plea.
That's the reason why I was terminated from Glen Oaks.
He was fired from the facilities when accusations were made.
Sable Palms terminated for that. Where else?
I think Clearwater, I was terminated for that.
Clearwater Center?
Yeah, terminated. I was terminated for that.
The Agency of Healthcare Administration, also known as AHCA, conducts background checks for CNAs in the state of Florida. They told us that because of the way Kane was charged in 2018, he was charged under a certain section that would only flag him during a background check if the crime included a minor. If he had been charged under different sections that include a disabled adult, he would have been flagged. A legal expert tells us this is a glitch in the law.
Wow.
That Senator Ed Hooper, when we showed him the allegations, the statutes, and a possible loophole that allowed Kane to work place to place.
Now that I know about your background and your investigation, I want to go visit with the Department of Health and the Agency for Healthcare Administration and find out what do we need to do to protect the frailest of our citizens.
It's bad enough that someone has to be in a nursing home for the rest of their life. To know then that they have to go through this, trauma of then being scared of being in a facility like that, it's very heartbreaking.
10 Investigates watched and listened to hours of interrogation of the CNA where he admitted to the crimes and even decided to write an apology letter to all of his victims.
Would you say you're guilty?
I'll say that I'm guilty for everything I did. And
Do you feel better getting that off your chest?
I feel better getting it off, knowing it's out there. I just want to start over. Like, I don't want to have that. And to be honest, I'm not going to lie, every time that knowing the things that I've done, every time I do walk into another facility, it's something that weighs on me.
After learning there were multiple victims around the Bay Area, 10 Investigates combed through arrest records and incident reports from several agencies to find this CNA was employed at multiple assisted living places, all while under investigation. They reached out to one hospital who employed him. The spokesperson said an independent organization handles the background checks for employees. For the incident that happened at their hospital, they told us that as soon as there was an accusation made by one of their patients, they filed an incident report and opened an investigation. But that CNA didn't come back to work. The internal investigation was never completed. He was rehired over and over, and his new employers never knew about the current investigations. Why? When Jennifer Titus originally reached out to ACA about this CNA, it said it had nothing to do with the CNA licensing and told her to contact the Florida Department of Health. Even after the arrest, when you pulled up this CNA's license on the Department of Health website, it showed no complaints and no discipline. The department wouldn't talk about it. So when the licensing board made its way to Tampa for a public hearing, 10 Investigates went to get answers.
Hi, Jen Titus with 10 News. How are you? Are you the director of the licensing board?
I am.
So the director that heads the licensing board, that is in charge of disciplining CNAs. According to law, the CNA should have been disciplined when he pled no contest to that 2018 arrest. It took the board 9 months to take action. In the meantime, there were 3 additional accusations at more facilities. We wanted to know why it took the board so long.
I'm not prepped today to discuss any specific case related to the agenda. I'm sorry.
But what about the process as a whole regarding
And again,
anything?
the process as a whole, a discussion about that would be made by appropriate staff at the department, and I'm not in the Enforcement Bureau.
Okay.
So enforcement staff would explain the enforcement process.
And of course, that enforcement board is in Tallahassee, where the Department of Health is located, and the communications office has denied 10 Investigates' request to talk to anyone further about the process.
10 Investigates confirmed police agencies could see prior incident reports of this CNA. After continuing to apply pressure to ACA, it admitted it handles background checks and sent a list of incidents this CNA was investigated for. And here's what the team found. Because the people he allegedly abused were not children, Florida statute did not require he lose his license immediately. That's when local lawmakers took over.
Since we aired our investigation last month, we heard outrage from you and also many of our state leaders. We've been talking to our legislators over the past couple of weeks, and they promised me that something like this would never happen again. Today, one of them put that in writing. Representative Chris Sproul is putting this amendment into the House's health care bill. It would change the background screenings of licensed healthcare workers. The new law would flag any employee during the screening process if that person has been arrested or is awaiting final disposition. The new legislation would also make battery of any patient in a licensed facility an offense that would lead to losing your license. The amendments were adopted in committee today and is expected to move to the House floor by the end of the week.
Lawmakers told our investigative team when they saw our initial investigation, they were furious. Although bills were already written for the legislative session and session was a day away from wrapping up, action needed to happen now. It couldn't wait. So they added the amendment to 2 separate bills just to increase the chances of it passing. The legislation passed both the Florida House and Senate unanimously and became law July 1st of this year. Lawmakers called it a victory for our most vulnerable. Loved ones call it protection for the ones they love the most.